it got kind of windy, and so there were branches of trees down, nothing big. But rain, I think that what they're worried about now is the soybeans are on the bank of the river that runs through their property, and the reason the soybeans are so late this year for them is the river flooded due to the spring rains, and so they had to replant. It meant they ended up with no corn for harvest, which they usually do, and they haven't been able to harvest their beans yet because they were late plants. They tend to plant their beans a little bit earlier. The cornfield was the corn that they had was just all foraged for silage, and I think those fields are being replanted with barley right now, because you can plant barley in the rain. Although that's still a little behind. Not so much plant barley in the rain, but plant barley when the ground's wet. So we're about 347. That's going to be... Is it 347? We'll go that way. So it's going to take me to the patch in the middle there. Yeah, they did lose power part of this week, but it was sort of down and then came back up within a few hours. But that meant no homeschooling because lack of power for that. I kind of think we could use a generator. At the moment I have some fairly pricey UPS systems on all the computers, or all of my computers, not the work one. If work wants me to put a UPS on, I'm going to need to provide it for me. But all my other computers have UPSs, primarily to protect the SSDs when the power goes out, because that would be an expensive problem. But I had to replace the batteries in my UPS because I think the last power failure we had, my UPS sort of beeped and said, "Hey, I'm providing power, I've got an hour and a half of power supply," and then the PC shut down within 30 seconds and the battery was completely drained. So yeah, new battery. That's a thing. Wife's UPS is working fine, and the other PC we now have has a brand new UPS with it, or for it. But it protects your equipment from total power failure and messing up your SSD or your hard drive. And we don't tend to run, as soon as the UPS kicks in, we tend to just shut down and say, okay, the power's there if we need it, but let's just let everything sit and not drain power. Have to leave the UPS turned on because the modem and the modem, which includes the Wi-Fi, is plugged into it, and our phones run on the Wi-Fi for the most part. if we go to cell towers, I don't think we're paying for data on cell towers, but we do get data if we're plugged into a Wi-Fi. And the provider we use, you have to get your phone through them, and the phone is set up such that it will always look for Wi-Fi signals, and if it detects one, it will strongly recommend that you connect to them, because otherwise they have to pay for the use of cell phone towers, and obviously during power failures that can be a thing for them. But then we don't have data either if we're on the cell towers, so that's kind of a problem, because you want to do things like the power's out, report it to the utility company, and then check the utility company map to see whether they know about you and when you're going to be back on. You need data for that. The other problem we have found is our phones are considered to be landlines. And so there are a lot of people that can't send text messages to landlines. And we can't send pictures through our phone. I can upload a picture onto Facebook, but I can't text a picture out, which has been limiting in some situations. It's not too big a deal. I can upload the pictures onto my desktop and then email them to someone, but I just can't text them out direct. It doesn't work. If my job required me to do that, then we'd probably go with a normal cell phone company. But for right now, this one is cheap and runs well. Yeah. Actually, since we moved in here, we've only lost power once, and it was for a couple of hours. In our previous home, whenever we lost power, it would be the power is lost for 2, 3, 4 days, which is annoying. And the last time we lost power there, obviously I had to go into the office to work because I didn't have the ability to work from home. And we stayed in a hotel because it was early summer, really hot, and that wasn't fun with a couple of foster kids in the house, cooped up in a single hotel room. And they estimated, it'll be out for 4 days, but turned out to be just 1.5, I think, at the end. The thing was, we were close to the high school, so normally if the power went out for us, the power was out for the high school, and the high school tends to get a better priority at reconnecting them. We did, because there's not many houses around where we used to live. So it's sort of, if we repair this, it's 100 people affected, whereas if we repair somewhere else, it's 500, 1,000. So we're usually at the end of the line, unless the break or the outage was before the high school, in which case we get done quite quickly. We use Republic Wireless for phones. And we kind of do that because we don't travel a lot, so just having something that, it's very cheap for the number of lines we have, and because we're at home most of the time, it just runs off the Wi-Fi. So the advantage with that, the battery lasts for ages because it's not constantly seeking cell signals when it's connected to Wi-Fi. And it's sat right by the Wi-Fi port, so it's not like it's draining the battery for signals. I've had cell phones in the past when we were on a regular cell phone provider. The battery would last a day and a half sometimes because the signal to the tower was so crappy. You pick up the phone, it's sort of, oh, there's no charge in the phone. Well, that's fine. Time to recharge it. I wonder how many phone calls I missed. But at least with this one, I mean, I can get occasionally up to a week on one battery charge, which isn't bad. And then the older the phone gets, the shorter the charge lasts. We usually replace the phone itself every couple of years, and we're not replacing it with the latest and greatest. So normally something that came out within the last 6 to 9 months and is better than the phone I have currently. I don't remember what this one is. I think this is a Samsung. Yeah, normally we've had Motorola phones, and I've now got Samsung, and so I don't know how to work it. So it works all different, which can be frustrating at times. Because again, I don't use it very often, so it's not something I'll sit down and study. How can I do this on this phone or whatever. I mean, it's a nice phone. It has a slightly bigger screen than the last one, and it does what I need it to, so it's not a bad thing. Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, I'm not paying for an iPhone because you're paying for the label on it. I think the last piece of Apple equipment I had was an Apple II Plus, which was my first computer, and I had disk drives on it when everybody else was using little PCs with tape recorders plugged into them to save and load stuff from, which were incredibly unreliable. Sit there for 10 minutes loading an application, and it's sort of, it failed. So you have to rewind the tape, adjust the volume on the tape player, and then do it all over again. That was so frustrating. Apple II Plus was a nice little computer, and at the time it was a lot cheaper than the fledgling IBM PCs that were coming out. I mean, an Apple cost $500, and an IBM PC would cost you $2,000. So, plus at the time there were games on the Apple computer, there were no games on an IBM PC. They were really strictly business systems. But I think the Apple IIe came out, and not much point in doing that. It was an Apple II Plus with lowercase text on it, and so I don't need that. Plus it cost quite a bit more. And then after that we got the Liza, and that didn't last long, but that was the prelude to the Mac, and that was ridiculously expensive, not a home PC at all. So at that point, when I finally decided I needed something different than the Apple II, got an Atari ST. And then after that I got a PC because they were becoming gaming platforms if you knew what you were doing in DOS. Which I kind of did. So I think... what was it? I think my first game was probably a game called Galactic Empire, which was you basically had a fleet carrier which had troop transports and fighters on, and you could basically build more fighters, build more troop ships, and go and invade the 24 planetary systems in the game, which were randomized every time you played. The names of the systems were all fixed, but their locations and tech level and populations were all randomized. And that was kind of fun. I think I had the regular what was it, Star Trek game or whatever it was called on a particular system, where you had the Starship Enterprise with 5,000 energy and 20 photon torpedoes, and you went out blowing up Klingons in a 10 by 10 grid. Then I also had Dung Beetles, which was kind of a Pac-Man type of thing, except you ran around picking up diamonds and left a trail of dung, and the Dung Beetles would wander around at random, and when they came across a trail of dung, they would follow it. No, this was on the Apple II. And so Dung Beetles, you could avoid the Dung Beetles, but as soon as they got on your trail, that was kind of it. You were going to get cornered and killed. Now the first level of that game, the maze was open. So if you went down a path, there was always multiple other ways to get out. But the second level was a closed maze, and so every path ended up in a dead end. And I completed the first level a couple of times, but that last level was just nah. Because you just needed one dung beetle to be following you and another one to randomly follow up behind it, and you were going to get caught. You could fool them by running down a path, turning around, running back to the junction, and then running down the other path. And when they came to a situation like that, it was a random 50-50, do I turn left, do I turn right? And if they picked wrong, you were safe, and if they picked right, you were done for. But surprisingly, fun game for what was a 32K game. Atari ST, I had things like Sub-Battle Simulator, Elite, and the likes. I think Frontier Elite 2 also came out on the Atari ST. And the fun thing about the Atari version of it, which I believe was also on other newer systems, was one of the pieces of equipment you could add to your Cobra was a retro rocket. So you could get someone running up behind you and then hit the retro, and you'd do a Battlestar Galactica Viper, rocket back between the chasing group and end up with your front guns pointing at them. Unfortunately, it only had a limited number of charges, and the number of charges it had was completely random. So you may only get one shot. It was kind of an expensive piece of kit. It was very unfortunate. You hit the retro and yeah, it worked, and then you get in trouble again and they're all chasing you and you get them all lined up behind you and you hit the retro and it doesn't work. And it's like, oh, it burned out last time I used it. I think on average you got about 3 shots from it before it needed to be replaced. But yeah, I didn't get into PC, the proper IBM compatible PC until probably around 1993, 94. It was just as the 486 DX2 chips were being released and were frightfully expensive when I bought my first PC. But it didn't take, so I bought my first PC had a 486 SX chip, which meant no math coprocessor. And I waited about 6 months, and the price of the DX2 dropped to around 1/8 of the price it was when I bought the PC. And at that point I figured, yeah, I can afford one of those now. So I had 6 months use on the PC before I got the processor I actually wanted in it. But it's always an argument to be made. It's kind of like currently the RTX 3080 came out a couple of weeks ago. Do you wait for the RTX 3080 to come out, or do you just buy a system with an RTX 2080 and make do with that until there's sufficient supply of 3080s and they come down in price a bit? My personal opinion is, if you need to upgrade your system, if you're buying a new PC, buy it with what you need right now, and worry about a bigger, better processor later, or bigger, better graphics card later. And if you're upgrading, then wait 6 months and it'll be a darn sight cheaper to upgrade to what was a latest and greatest 6 months ago, and it's probably adequate for all the games you're playing right now. I think I'm running a GTX 1080 and it works perfectly well for all the games I play at excellent resolution and streams them. So I don't need the latest and greatest, but I could have one, but it's not an absolute need right now. Try and get this all straightened up again, and we can cut through, or we can just run straight lines up and down the field. So we're only going to be doing these 2 fields today. The reason why we started and the clock was 2 hours, 1.5 hours later than when I ended the stream, I did get completely OCD and restack the hay bales in the shed, so they're now a little bit neater than they were. 8 megahertz. My Apple II was half a megahertz, I think, and you could buy an expansion board for it that gave you a 2 megahertz processor, and that cost as much as a new PC. So sort of, yeah, not an option I took. Plus, I hate to think how impossible it would have been to play things like Dung Beetle and Space Invaders at 2 times speed. Yeah, 2 times instead of half time speed. I believe the Atari ST was about 4, and then when I got a PC, that was first one was 33. I got mine just after my boss at work did. He got a deal from Dell wherein they were selling. I think it had DX33 486, and they were packaging it up with a LaserJet 2 printer. So he figured it all out and said, "Well, I'm getting the printer for free, effectively." And I went over to see it one evening, and he'd bought X-Wing, and whoa. Flight sim for Star Wars. And he had that for a long time. And it was the thing that got him his new computer at the office, because he knocked up a spreadsheet at home, and yeah, he used the same software as our work did. So he saved the spreadsheet off onto a floppy disk and brought it into work, and one night we were working late, and it's sort of, yeah, I'm done for the night. So he said, "Oh, I've got a spreadsheet to show you." So he gets the floppy disk out, sticks it in his PC, his work PC, and turns it all,